Good morning, everyone. Welcome. Thanks for joining us today. I'm Roz. I'm the Customer Success Manager here at Rotageek. We're excited to be bringing you this webinar titled From Workforce Management to Workforce Transformation, How William Hill is Rewriting the Rota and Scheduling Playbook. Today, we're going to be exploring how forward-thinking retail leader William Hill are using data and AI to shift from tactical workforce management to a more strategic, predictive, and people-centered approach. And hopefully you'll walk away with some actionable insights you can apply immediately with a clear view of how workforce management can be turned into a strategic advantage and not an administrative burden. So housekeeping, this session will last about 45 minutes with a 15 minutes Q&A at the end. If you have any questions as we go through, please do use the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen to ask any questions. If we don't manage to answer all of your questions in this session, we'll email you after the webinar with a list of the answers as well. The webinar will be recorded and sent out after the session, so don't worry about taking any notes. And we'll also be launching a couple of polls throughout the session, so please keep an eye out for those. I'm just about to launch the first poll today, and we'll keep this active for the next few minutes if you would like to participate. So let's get started. Your speakers today are apologies. Joe Leith, Director of Retail Analytics at William Hill, and Phil Coxon, MD at Rotageek. So I'll hand over to them to introduce yourselves.
Good morning, Joe. Joe, I am going to say, as the honoured guest on this webinar, could you please go first and introduce yourself?
Happy to, Phil. Thank you guys for having me today. So, good morning, everyone. My name's Joe. I am Director of Analytics here at William Hill Retail. I've been part of the business now for coming on 19 years. I'm uniquely privileged to have the view of workforce management in this business as someone who used to work in a shop and now is lucky enough to run a team of very smart people who, among other things, take care of workforce planning for our 1,300 shop estate in the UK.
Oh, it's fantastic. It's fantastic. And we're so pleased to have you speaking today and to jump into your experiences. I mean, 19 years, it's phenomenal. So thank you so much. Good morning, everyone. My name is Phil Coxon. I actually look after Rotageek, our ELMO UK business, which is an HRIS, HR software business for sort of mid-market enterprise businesses, and also Breathe, which is an HRIS for the SME area. So really super excited to dig in today. I think it's a pertinent time, I think, around Christmas time when you're talking about workforce and so forth, because two things are really prominent, I believe, right at this time of year. That's your well-being of your staff, because it's a lot of family and a lot of things going on. It's generally incredibly busy, and also for businesses, it's around their bottom line as well. Hence why we have things like Black Friday and so forth. So I think it's really pertinent time to be having this discussion. So shall we? Oh, if we got the poll up, let me just see. Oh, here we go. So I'm just having a look here. Can you see that as well, Joe? We've got, how prepared is your business to use data and AI for labor planning and forecasting? So here we've got up to 5. So we've got a sort of good spread, I would say, but I would say most people are around the 2 area. So that can help frame, I think, the discussion here, where a lot of people, it looks like, will be learning, interested in your journey, I suspect, and what you have discovered, because I understand you've gone from pen and paper through to Rotageek, right? So that's going to be a really interesting journey. So shall we dig into it? I'd love to just start at the beginning. What does workforce adaptability mean inside a business like William Hill?
So we have some unique challenges. As a high street business, we have all of the usual cost controls and pressures that I'm sure most of the attendees on the call will recognise. But uniquely in gambling, in betting, we have very small teams. So our locations usually run on 4 to 5 people, and that means our workforce model relies on sharing resource across sites to keep costs down and to improve flexibility. We have quite a lot of distributed responsibility, and really extended trading hours. So from a licensing perspective, betting shops in the UK can trade between 7 a.m. and 10 p.m. 7 days a week. Of course, not all of our shops do that because the demand isn't there, but that gives us
Mm,
some unique challenges when it comes to things like daily, weekly, seasonal
mm,
demand. As a business, we have a high proportion of part-time workers. The flexibility offered by working in a betting shop really appeals to working parents and also to students. We are a majority female business because of that. So we're really trying to maximize that flexibility of location, time, and skill. So we think of it as where, who, and what,
mm,
without
mm.
compromising on our ambitions for fairness, communication, transparency. I guess from my own experience, having worked behind the counter in a betting shop, remembering that these are real people.
Yeah.
And I think that's really key to deploying these advanced systems, is not losing sight of the human being at the other end with doctor's appointments and school runs and a
Mm.
life to plan. So adaptability is really for us about balancing all of those needs together, if that makes sense.
Yeah, 100%, 100%. It's interesting you say that. I think with Rotageek, the way they've looked at it, you've got to have a great system that works, but the front end, the consumer, the employee, that has got to work, and it's got to be seamless, and it's got to be engaging, I think. And as you said, because that's really, the area that you're focusing on. So
Absolutely.
yeah, can you tell me then, what were the sort of key pressures and realities that the William Hill had to rethink, about how its workforce was being scheduled and managed?
I think candidly, and again, I'm sure a lot of your attendees will recognize this. Workforce costs are accelerating so quickly in the economy as it is. We're looking at national living wage being over 40% more than it was in 2021 over a 5-year
Mm,
period from April next year, which is an enormous burden for employers to bear on the P&L. We have all of those pressures. We have the usual operational peaks. Our operational peaks are led by sport, obviously.
mhm.
So at least we get the chance to kind of plan in advance for when they might be. We're a very specialist industry. Betting has its own language, its own understanding. So retention's really important to us. So our customers get knowledgeability. But I guess as a heavy licensed industry, the lead for a lot of our adaptability over the last few years has been colleague well-being. Our colleagues are charged to interact with their customers and protect their well-being in a way that most retailers wouldn't be. And our colleagues' well-being is our customers' well-being, which is,
Yeah,
even if it wasn't just the right thing to do, a regulatory imperative. So this process really evolved from us from something we wanted to do because we wanted to develop the capabilities into a really value-adding journey.
yeah, yeah. No, I think it's super important, right? So, and we're sort of talking here about this journey from sort of workforce management to workforce transformation, but it's so precious, that area. You've got to be really careful how you do that, and do it in a thoughtful way, right? And it's imperative, right? Because it's the crux of your business, isn't it, going forward? So, you've described the shift from like reactive scheduling to sort of insight-led planning. What did that actually look like on the ground?
Yeah, I think this is probably a really interesting question because if I'm candid, I look back on it, Phil, and I think we were a bit naive.
Yeah,
I think leading that kind of transformation at the time, we almost operated from a belief that if we provided better tools and better insight, that our colleagues would pick it up, run with it, and reap the benefits. And I think we underestimated the inertia of this is the way we've always done things. So,
yeah,
so our
yeah,
business has been on the high street for 90 years. We have a massive commitment to doing things in a certain way. And it wasn't until we got out into the estate and started talking to our people directly, that we were able to identify that personal inertia as a bit of a problem. So I remember distinctly having a conversation with a lovely lady called Cheryl who worked in one of our shops in Wood Green in North London, who explained to me that she'd been coming into work on a Monday morning, taking her shifts off the notice board and writing them in her paper diary for her entire 35-year career. And why did that need to change? And I think getting that transformation empowered was about coming a bit closer to the user and explaining why that needed to
Mm,
change.
mm. Yeah, that's a huge shift, isn't it? Because it's worked well for many people, right? And as you say, they're wedded to the role as well. I suspect that you retain employees for a long time. I mean, you're a great example of that, right?
Absolutely.
And then you input change into that process, and they're all like, "Whoa, this is not what I
Yeah,
wanted." So,
absolutely. Our longest serving employee is on shift today down in Maidstone and has been with us for 54 years.
no way, no way.
Absolutely.
That's phenomenal.
Yeah.
That's great. Well, that's testimony to the business, right? And the way the business works. So that's
Lots of
fantastic. So, God, so tell me then, this is a big transformation you're about to put, on the employee. Where did you start? And did you have any sort of quick wins or mindset changes that you thought, this will help us get them on the journey? Because there's many, as you said, are not going to like this process, perhaps, right?
Yeah, quite right. And I think it's a bit of a cliche not to let the perfect be the enemy of the good.
Mhm.
But nevertheless, when we've made such a seismic shift across 10,000 people and the way they kind of plan their daily lives, not just their working lives, but their daily lives, their family
Yeah.
lives, because we're a 7 day a week business, right? We learned quickly that it was better to begin with an MVP, right? Put together the minimum functionality, make it as familiar as possible. Simple changes like if your colleagues are used to seeing, because we moved from pen and paper, if your
Mm,
colleagues are used to seeing their shop teams in alphabetical order, can you set up your UI so it's in
mm,
alphabetical order, or
mm,
the
mm.
manager need to be at the top? They seem to be low value, but they build that familiarity. And once you've got that foundational element launched, adopted, accepted, you can prioritize that kind of feedback loop, learn and iterate improvements. And that's really the journey we've been on with Rotageek over the last few years, accessing more and more functionality as the benefits of each package become embedded within the employee
Yeah.
population. So yeah, I think starting small, building MVPs, iterating forward, mirroring familiar workflows wherever you can. There were our really early wins.
Yeah, yeah, I understood. I think that's the right way to do it. Just out of interest, your long-term employees, were they harder to get on the journey than your newer employees, or did you find it was a mix, or it didn't really work out like that? Just
I
as a
I think the phrase technophobia gets tossed around,
yeah, yeah, yeah,
especially in a business like ours with such long-term employees.
yeah.
I would say that if you're not communicating well, they can be the most
Mm,
resistant.
mm,
But if you can get them on side because they're trusted voices in their teams, they become
yeah,
the best champions.
yeah, yeah,
So I think it's an argument for investing a bit more communication and openness in that segment
yeah.
of the population if you can.
No, and I like the way you're thinking about it, right? Think about what they're used to and try and replicate that, because that sort of gives the gateway into new, right?
Yeah,
And I think that's really smart, just sort of, and shows also an insight into your employee base, right? And clearly you've done some background there, some checking, some understanding what works day to day, speaking to the managers. I think that really is a paramount importance when you're about to do this large amount of change going forward. So yeah.
yeah, I agree. I think changing as little as possible is
Yeah, yeah,
always going to be a
yeah,
path to easy
yeah,
adoption.
yeah. Fair enough, fair enough. So, thinking about today's workforce challenges, retail and hospitality leaders, they talk a lot about the managing the peaks, and you've touched on it before, right? Your peaks are not quite the same as, let's say Black Friday and so on. Yours are key sporting events. Got a World Cup next year, for example, right? So you've got these big
Big.
events that are coming, and then you've got transitions and inconsistencies and so on. So, how does William Hill approach those challenges differently today to how you did prior to having Rotageek?
I think this is where we think of it as AI and advanced automation.
Right.
Is where our predictive abilities have really added value.
Mm,
So we've been lucky to work with external experts at Rotageek and in other places to develop really cutting edge insight to join up the picture from our,
mm,
our 1,300 shops. Bearing in mind, Phil, of course, that no two of those shops are the same.
Yeah, yeah, I
Business
bet.
mixes are different. You know,
Yeah,
people in Scotland bet different products to people in
right.
London, and so on. So you really do need to get the best optimization and the best value add, you need to be looking from the bottom up. And that's an enormous amount of work for human teams to do with any frequency. Where AI and things like natural language models to investigate insight have become really useful for us is speeding up that process. So
Right.
3 or 4 times a year we can adjust trading hours in shops on an ad hoc basis to reflect their local demand, and
Yeah,
then map over our workforce planning on that. It's allowed us to move out our horizons in a way that would have been an enormous investment of time and
yeah.
resources if we tried to do it manually.
Yeah, fair enough. Fair enough. It's interesting, you talk about AI, right? Some businesses are living and breathing AI, some less so. Some consumers are living and breathing it. They say with AI, you tend to have to need an aha moment where you're like, oh, that's just saved me that, or it's got me to where I need to go quicker. Um, I'm just interested when you do AI to sort of automate a schedule and so on. You must have had employees who are like, oh, I don't want to do. Oh, hold on, that's really helpful, right? And did you get that sort of moment where
We
they were like,
we
yeah, that
absolutely did, yeah, and not just for this particular use case, but for anything else that we use AI into, or even forms of advanced automation that, from a colleague perspective, look like AI,
mm,
that aren't
yeah,
necessarily what an expert would say. Yes, that's an AI use case. Um,
yeah,
People on the
yeah,
ground are going to be mistrustful of being managed by a machine. They're going to want
mm,
to know that a human being put due consideration into the
yeah,
decision making. And I think where we've got the best engagement with AI use cases is where they're implicit, not explicit. So they're doing the heavy lifting for us, they're doing the grunt
yeah,
work for us, but ultimately they're delivering recommendations for a human being, for a leader, for a manager
yeah,
to make an
yeah,
informed decision, including
yeah,
all of those intangibles that you can't
yeah.
bake into a model like that.
Yeah, yeah. It's not taking over, right? It's supercharging the people you know and trust and value who are already in the business. It's making them more productive, and I think that's the superpower, really, isn't it?
Yeah,
So
I totally
that's
agree. And I think that's where we'll see a lot of growth in
mm,
machine learning models and AI over the next few years in actual real world use cases
yeah,
on the high street, in businesses in the UK. My personal belief is it will start to remove friction
yeah,
rather than focus on the kind of big, sexy deliverable cases and
yeah,
free up people to do
yeah,
more.
yeah. No, I 100% agree. 100%. So you touched on the point, you've got so many stores around the country and, we all know the country's very different in different parts of the country. So you must be a great representation of that. So can you give us a sense of the biggest workforce challenges that you were seeing across your entire network and which have been the hardest to solve?
I mean, the primary challenge for us over the last few years has been cost, and I think
Right.
we should be candid about that. Candid,
Yeah.
right? We are proud as an employer to pay regardless of age, even when it comes to national living wage. So we pay the higher rate even
Mm,
for a substantial proportion of our colleagues who are 18, 19, 20 years old.
yeah.
We want to continue to do that, and we're proud to do that. But it does mean that we've borne the full brunt of 40% increases in those costs. Optimization across 1,300 locations trading anywhere between 7 a.m. and 10 p.m., 364 days of the year. Even small efficiencies quickly roll up to really impactful numbers.
Yeah. Right.
So that was our kind of initial driver. But
Yeah.
what we've seen over the last few years is a change in customer preference. So in the land-based gambling industry, we're seeing customers move more towards digital touch points. So self-service
Hmm.
betting. Almost 75% of the industry's customers now prefer to use a self-service terminal. And what we're seeing is that's starting to disconnect customer
Right.
demand
Right.
from workforce requirements.
Yeah.
We have had a much easier time adapting to that than we would have done if we didn't have the wealth of data and insight that we've got now, I think.
Right, right. Yeah, that's really interesting, right? And but you've got a big network of stores still as well, right? So I suspect it's balancing out and that understanding of are those customers solely digital, or are they digital and a bit for and it's like, do you find you get a bit of that mix up and you get more
Absolutely.
insight?
And the realization that even when customers are coming to our shops and using digital
Mm,
touchpoints,
mm,
they're choosing our shops over mobile or online gambling because they value the experience.
yeah,
It's really what our colleagues are there to provide.
yeah, yeah,
Expertise is important, understanding is important, obviously. But you come to a betting shop, at least in part, for a social experience. And it's
yeah.
allowed us to tailor that across shops that have a lot of dwelling customers, for example. We can identify them much more easily and then map our workforce planning to those insights. So, yeah, having everything explicit makes it much easier to make impactful decisions, bringing those data sets together.
Yeah, I bet that's a huge benefit, I suppose, of especially in your role, right, which is all about that sort of ecosystem and understanding where the
Totally.
optimization areas are. So talking about balancing and cost, compliance, and care, right, which is really what a key part of this webinar is all about. How do you approach getting that balance right for William Hill?
Again, it's maybe a bit of an additional challenge for us because gambling is among the most regulated sectors in the
Yeah.
and quite rightly so. Um, Compliance is a non-negotiable for us. So, in addition to all of the usual um, employment law and workforce compliance that any large employer would think about, we also have this concern that we deliver the right people in the right places at the right times to maintain that safe gambling care for our customers. And that means really balancing kind of working time compliance with an additional level of engagement for our people.
Hmm.
Our shop managers in particular tend to be local. They're members of their local community. They,
Right, right.
they tend to like a flutter themselves. They personally know a lot of their customers. They care
Yeah,
deeply
yeah.
about them. For us, balancing all of those needs and making sure that we are confident in our compliance with national living wage regulations, with the working time regulations, that we are delivering the right kind of adherence for
Mm,
our regulator, and that our colleagues are being able to add that personal touch that makes, in my view, betting shops the safest place to gamble in the country.
mm, mm.
It's all about, for us, been having open dialogue with our colleagues. Um,
Yeah,
and we have obviously our own internal social platforms, our own feedback loops. Um, but one of the big learnings we took there was to put a face on these changes, to deploy things from a person, not a team, and allow our colleagues to ask questions, gain their understanding. They are much better from the ground up at balancing cost, compliance, and care than
yeah,
we will ever be from the top.
yeah.
We have to empower them to do that.
No, 100%. Can you describe that, putting a face to it? So did you have like a project owner that you were like, this is the person you can go to? How describe, just
The person
describe
who
how you,
attracted all the criticism. Yes, that was
that's one
it.
way of looking at it. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
It is one way of looking at it, but actually, criticism's a good thing, right?
Mm,
We, when we deployed these changes, there are obviously concerns. There are always going to
mm,
be gaps in understanding.
yeah.
Now, we have our own, as I say, internal platforms. I've had some really good, thorough and forthright conversations with colleagues in public on
Hmm.
those platforms to help hopefully translate understanding into a way that they kind of grasp and grab
Yeah.
and can hopefully champion to others.
Yeah.
And I feel I'd be lying if I said we haven't learned things from them,
Mm,
spotted gaps in our own understanding.
yeah.
As I said at the top of the call, right? The communication and transparency is key to any change, and particularly where that change is affecting the day-to-day lives of so many people.
Yeah, 100%. And you're absolutely right. Communication is absolutely critical, and over communicating, I think, even in our
Yes.
business, just you think you've mentioned it a few times, but actually you need to keep mentioning it,
Mhm.
because people are busy and they've got many things going on, and that's got to cut through. So I 100% agree with you there. I suppose also from your perspective, having been on the shop floor, as it were, right, and then grown through, you can play that. I have been in your shoes, and I think that's incredibly powerful for the change you're
I hope so,
bringing
yeah.
across.
I
Yeah,
hope so.
yeah, it's good. It's good. So, what does, in your mind, fair scheduling look like in practice? And what have you learned about sort of getting fairness right at the scale that you're dealing with at William Hill?
And I think this again was one of the most interesting questions. Because fairness for me isn't a KPI. You can't measure it directly and stick it on the dashboard. And in my role as shepherding analytics, that makes me deeply uncomfortable with things that you can't just put a number on. No, I kid. Because it's subjective, I think it's a mistake to try and manufacture a measure of fairness. There are some simplistic measures of fairness, like how many Saturdays have you worked in the last 3 months, but they don't take into account people's personal preferences. When I worked in shop, I actually quite liked working Saturdays. It was busy. I got paid to watch football and talk to my punters. And my family were happy because it meant I could have an extra day off in the week and do school clubs and take the kids swimming. So for us, it's about empowering individual teams to agree between themselves what's fair and right for them. And that's all about flexibility, going back to what we were talking about. The advantage of having a cloud solution like Rotageek, even in its most basic form, is the inherent transparency. Everyone who's involved, everyone who's affected can see everything that's going on. And we are talking about teams that spend a lot of time with each other. They'll talk about these things, they'll discuss these things, they'll come to their own compromises. But again, I kind of go back to my personal value in this, which is give people the tools to get it right from the ground up, and that will be more successful than trying to impose something like fairness from the top down.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. Let them manage it themselves. It must have been interesting when you first showed that transparency though, right? Where everyone could see. That must have been a major moment, for people to be like both empowering and a little bit scary, I suspect. How was that?
Absolutely. And the longer it goes on, the more history you build up. And the more visibility people get. If there is a colleague who's perhaps not behaving fairly, that's challenged very quickly. It becomes part of your culture very quickly. People don't sit on their problems. That communication and transparency becomes part of the colleague's way of working as well. One of the things I'm most proud of is the number of our shops who are able to plan ahead weeks and months in advance to take care of, I know I keep coming back to it, but things like doctor's appointments and school runs, the really important things. From the reactive space we were in even a couple of years ago has been a massive mindset shift, but it has just become the way we do things. And that's very gratifying.
Yeah, I bet 100%, because it's the little things that makes a workforce like work well, right? If you can empower them to give them the flexibility. I suspect also sometimes it's a chat. You get employees who don't take enough holiday, or they leave it all to the end because they haven't thought about it. If they're seeing other people do it, it's almost puts in their mindset, oh yeah, I've got to do that myself. And then especially you see a countdown to it, right? Oh, it's a long time since I've got holiday next. I should really think about looking after myself. And I think employee well-being is this superpower in your business, right? So,
and I think that's one of the cases where automation and AI can really help, making sure that colleagues do take holiday rest period, that even if they weren't, as I said, regulatory imperatives, they're the right thing to do. And part of the way we've deployed that is we work with Rotageek every year to assess demand 12 months in advance at a very broad level because things change, and to pre-book suggested holidays for every member of staff of the business.
Great.
Now, that removes the problem of I'm coming to the end of the year and I've still got 2 weeks left to go. They might not be the holidays you end up taking, but hopefully we don't get to the end of the year and people lose rest time that they should have had.
Yeah, 100%, right? And then they're supercharged for the busy periods you've got, exactly. So yeah, so it's interesting this because I suspect this, you've sort of touched on it here, this frees up the managers in a way from dealing with these firefighting problems and, some of these small details because the employees are looking after it themselves. And I suspect that allows them more to lead, right? How did sort of insight-led planning help make that shift for your managers?
Candidly, reactive scheduling, any reactive action, it hurts your people, it's bad for your business, it's bad for your bottom line, it's at best a distraction, and at worst a huge time thief. We ended up, as I said before, with a fair amount of resistance, especially in the early days of our transformations, that was purely from habit, purely from inertia. it can be hard to get senior stakeholders on side. Your CFO probably doesn't think that Alice's shift next week is that important in the great scope of things, and he may be right, but they roll up to very big numbers. I think giving managers and leaders especially the ability to identify and measure their own problems so that they don't have to come to a BI team and say, oh, how does, what's my scheduling balance? What's my demand balance for the last few weeks? How well have I been doing? To put that power in their hands not only helps them solve the problems, but helps them prevent problems in future. So the amount of time that our colleagues spend on scheduling has fallen off precipitously in the last few years. And as I say, it's become our way of doing things, which is really the metric for success. I think I'd get the same inertia today if I tried to move our colleagues onto something else as we did when we first moved off pen and paper.
Yeah, I'm sure, right? It's like the change is always difficult, and it's anything you've done and got used to, and then you disrupt that. It's a process, isn't it? So, and as much as you can tell them the benefits, you've got to live and breathe those benefits, I suspect, before you really engage with it and take it forward. So,
absolutely, and encourage them to tell each other.
Once
you get people on board, bring them on board as champions, as advocates. That makes such a difference.
And we find that a lot when we're taking Rotageek to businesses like yourselves who are on pen and paper, and they're just like, oh, this is an enormous bit of work for us. And we're like, yes, we know, but businesses have been through that change, and it's the other side looks so much brighter. But yes, it will be a bit of work, but you do that in the right way, and it will open up so many doors, right? And it's
I spoke recently to another business who were considering the same sort of transition and were currently managing their scheduling in spreadsheets. And I think one of the messages that I gave them, and I'm always keen to give, is you realize an initial benefit, right? You gain an initial efficiency or productivity boost, and it hits your bottom line, and you're very happy of that. But what you don't necessarily see is how that supercharges future change. So as you iterate forward, it's easier then to move to the next level and the next level beyond that, because you take all those benefits with you. It really does compound, I think, over time.
Yeah, no, it's really good. It's really interesting. I just want to touch on a bit more on AI and data. Clearly, some of your favorite topics, I suspect.
Sure.
AI, it's such an enormous topic right now. And clearly, with William Hill, you're grounded in human empowerment. You've touched on it many times, actually, with the stores and the managers and letting them lead. And, they're small teams ultimately, but they're deeply embedded in the community. I think that's incredible. How do you see then AI supporting, but not replacing the managers? I think that's a really critical piece.
Look, let me apologise to any of my colleagues from Evoke who are on the call and have heard me make this speech a dozen times. The Industrial Revolution took, 80 years? The adoption of the internet was into businesses was 20 years. AI has this unique adoption challenge. I don't think we've actually seen the AI revolution yet. I think as you've said yourself, people are waiting for that one killer app, that one big bang. But it has a unique challenge in adoption in that it evolves faster than people can keep up. Capabilities, even a few months ago, were completely different than they are today. And a few years ago, some of the things AI can do for us today would have been science fiction. That's part of my belief that the true value-adding use cases for AI will not be to do what I think of as the big rocks. They're not going to solve the big explicit problems that you face in your commercial space or your regulatory space. What AI tools will do and are doing is quietly and implicitly removing friction, solving problems that take resource, that are frustrating, things that your people just don't really want to do. Every business has probably got one or two issues that are broken, but they've never attracted enough investment to fix because they're not broken enough. And I think that's where AI is going to come in, and it's not going to be a big bang. It's not going to save the day, but it should, if used wisely, free up leaders to have high quality conversations instead of, firefighting and
Yeah, yeah,
grunt work, if you like.
yeah, absolutely. Which gives a better employee experience as well, right? So,
Absolutely.
it sort of works
The
both
things
ways.
that the things that leaders do because they're not firefighting rotas
Yeah,
shouldn't be on a KPI dashboard. They're the
yeah,
intangibles. That's what we
yeah,
want them to do.
yeah. But again, it's that super, it's what makes the working experience great for the employee because
Completely.
the
And it
manager
shows
has the
in your
time.
retention. It shows in
Yeah,
your productivity.
yeah,
Ultimately, all of these things do hit your bottom line, but you can't have a dashboard that tracks quality conversations I've had with my manager this quarter.
yeah. Yeah, that's true. That's true. So, can you give us some decisions managers now able to make faster and more confidently, let's say, because of the data and the forecasting and the insights that they're getting from the platform?
Yeah, I think there's only really one decision that sits fundamentally and foundationally under all of the benefits you get from good scheduling and planning and under all of the problems that you get from bad scheduling and planning. And that decision is, what is Alice working next week or the week after or the week after that? And bearing in mind that decision has to be made by a leader who's going to sit next to Alice, has to
Mm.
be personally accountable and has to look her in the eye.
Yeah.
Everything we've done over the last few years has been about empowering leaders at the right levels to make those decisions as quickly and accurately and as aligned with our values as they possibly
Mm.
can, again and again and again and again. Embedding those tools into, I guess the proposition is, let us help you do the things that make your life
Mm.
easier, has really been about repeating and refining the insight we give managers to do that from the bottom up.
Yeah.
Is
Yeah.
everybody happy with their shift pattern the week
Yeah.
before Christmas? That's your measure of success.
It's interesting. Did you, when you integrated the system and went through the change process, did you you must have been getting feedback, and I suspect initially, oh, this is change and this is hard work, but then over time, just the pieces you're talking about, oh right, optimization of schedules, oh, you've taken away a huge amount of work. Did you find that the narrative coming back from the shop floors started to change? Was it a gradual change or did it change quite quickly? What was your take on that?
Absolutely a gradual change. I'm
Yeah,
not,
yeah.
Phil, I'm not a believer in watershed moments, especially with natural changes like this. I think if you're having watershed moments, they're probably artificial. The real pride from us has been looking back and realizing where we were 2 years ago, 4 years ago, 8 years ago.
Mm.
Yes, you can see that in measurables. The number of shifts that have been planned and agreed with an employee in really plain terms is something like 8 times what it was when we first started weekly.
Wow. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
our colleagues are just knowing what they're doing further in
Yeah.
advance. But in terms of feedback, I think you've got success when you just have that implicit understanding of this is the way we do things.
Yeah.
And actually, the feedback you get is when someone or something is outside of that process,
Mm.
there's concern about it. And that tells you, looking back, that your change has been accepted and
Yeah. Yeah.
integrated, and it's making the world better for those people.
Yeah. That's great.
Yeah, it's been much more looking back than kind of
Yeah.
waiting for those big bang moments, if that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah. As you say, because it's gradual, you don't see the change until you look back and review it, and then you're
No,
like, oh yeah,
absolutely.
I can see where we
No,
come from.
I don't remember the day my beard went grey, but I do remember it not.
Don't worry, we can't see on this video. Don't worry.
Yeah, I've picked my lighting quite well.
Yeah. So, what can you give us a sense of from your perspective, having gone through this journey, what are the misconceptions you think that people have about using AI in workforce planning?
I do think it comes back to, I mean, there are two core problems with that. There's the misconception top down, I think from leaders, is perhaps through a lack of clarity that
Mm.
we're not doing anything new. So how are we adding value?
Mm.
We're going to deploy this big system at a certain cost, at a certain time to integrate, develop this, and it just does what our people already do. So how does that play through into my bottom line? How does that improve my process adherence?
Mm.
And that's a really challenging one to solve, Phil, because I think in some of those use cases you just have to show them.
Mm.
You kind of have to get it off the ground. You have to get the belief, the trust, the leap of
Yeah.
faith, and show them. And as you know, we've been quite happy over the last couple of years to work with Rotageek and other customers to kind of demonstrate those use cases. Look how this can work for you. Share our success, because I do think you know, everyone benefits if it's done well. But the challenge bottom up is really about trust.
Yeah.
It is that fear of being managed by a machine. How does a computer
Yeah.
know my customers better than I do? And we've solved for that by just being super clear about what we are doing with AI, and more importantly, what we're not doing. Being clear about where that decision actually sits. So our models make excellent recommendations, but ultimately it's your line manager who decides whether to
Yeah.
accept those recommendations or not. And they'll see the results play through in their own P&L accountability or process accountability. So yeah, continuing to keep the human decision maker involved, I think, is a big jump forward on trust.
Yeah, I totally agree. It comes back to your point you made before. It's supercharging your team, but your team are still the team who are in charge, right? So they're still making the decisions, they're still accountable, and they're still having the conversations with their employees. And you don't take that away. It's not AI doing that. It's just they have more insights to deliver more what the employee needs, right?
I never want to take the decision away from a leader. What I'd like to take away is the 4 or 5 hours of squirreling through spreadsheets and BI dashboards to make that decision.
Yeah, 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 and frees them all up, right, to do more of the things they enjoy. Yeah, fair enough. So, can you give me a sense of sort of measurable changes that you've seen when you've been adopting this more adaptive insight-led approach? Have the things that really sprung out of you that you're like, oh, I wasn't expecting that, or is it things you had hoped to see when integrating Rotageek?
Yeah, first and foremost, as I've been candid throughout the call, the efficiency benefits are really substantial. When, as I say, you've got 1,300 locations, 364 days a year, you improve your efficiency by a fraction of a percentage point. And at the year end, that plays through into a big number in the P&L. The challenge there has been being clear about how that's played through, because it can get lost in noise, right? And that's where really good MI comes in even more useful, when you're having budgeting conversations and you can kind of demonstrate what you've been able to deliver that you probably couldn't if you didn't have that MI at your fingertips. In terms of measurables from the colleagues, obviously, like any other business, we do regular engagement surveys. We take clear feedback through a number of channels. We have a national colleague forum who I am lucky to engage with on a regular basis and have absolutely no qualms about telling me when we've got something wrong. We see those measurable KPIs in engagement moving forward in comparison to where we started, never taking huge leaps, but continually, iteratively coming up. And that another use case for AI that we've been playing with over the last few months is using it to sentiment analyze colleague feedback, for example. And sometimes it is reducing the number of things that your colleagues are concerned about. It's not necessarily getting lots of good feedback and thanks and congratulations, but it's seeing those concerns go down the list. When we survey our colleagues on their fairness, on their openness, on what they perceive in communication, those scores continue to move forward in line with what we're delivering. And I think we underestimate sometimes, Phil, top down, how important it is to Alice that she gets the right shifts 2 weeks out from now.
Yeah. And probably speaks to your retention of your staff, right? Again, if you're doing the right thing by your staff and giving them the flexibility, but also giving them what they want. And there's certain times where you want to give them more, right? Give them the opportunity. If they want to earn more and do more shifts, they can take it.
Oh, quite right. Yeah. And as I said before, we have a lot of students who work with us.
Yeah.
The flexibility of working in an environment like ours really, really, really appeals to them. Retention is not a key metric for that subset. Right? They're not going to stay with us. They're going to move on to their career. But what we do see is they move on and they tell us at exit that they've enjoyed their time with us, that it was productive, that it's given what they wanted, is not interfered with their studies. And that's really tangible feedback that says,
Yeah.
great, we can tailor our recruitment policies to
Yeah.
continue
Yeah.
to offer that experience.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, multivalent, lots of different ways of finding it, but ultimately measurable colleague feedback has improved on a kind of gradual gradient with some with some leaps forward as we've done big bangs. But
Yeah.
when you look back to where we were 3 or 4 years ago, there's a gulf, which is great.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. That's great. It's interesting you say that. To 3 or 4 years ago, you must have had expectation when you first started implementing that I'm going to see this change, and I expect to see that within this period. But it sounds more you had a more gradual change process. But you must have had some KPIs. You were like, I expect this to do this by this period. Did you have that in the back of your mind that you may not have shared, to be fair, but an expectation?
No, we absolutely did. One of the first things, one of the first benefits we got out of coming on board with Rotageek, and initially, and I'm going back 8 years or so now, coming off pen and paper and into a fully cloud-based solution,
Mm.
was we could understand what our KPIs should be in scheduling. So we had ambitions, but we didn't really have KPIs because we didn't have anything to measure. We were managing in a legacy system that saw our colleagues do their rotas on paper and put them in the post to be entered into the payroll system.
Well, yeah.
Which kind of, now that I reflect on it, just it seems like such a long journey. But establishing those KPIs was really useful. We can measure how many employees have confirmed shifts X weeks in advance for the first time.
Yeah.
So we can make that a KPI. And
Yeah.
then what gets measured gets done. And that's where
Yeah.
you see the feedback come from the employee.
That's great. That's great. So you've clearly gained a lot through the process, just around how you're working and so on. What do you think the skills and capabilities of tomorrow's retail leaders, will really need based on your experience, to thrive in this sort of adaptable, insight-driven environment that we're seeing more of?
Yeah, I think more so than ever, any people leader needs a level of data literacy that we might have kind of farmed out to experts and BI teams and analytics teams traditionally. AI and automation make that much easier, because you don't need to be a Power BI expert to generate a dashboard if you've got a feature set like Rotageek's natural language MI interface, which really helps those leaders bridge that gap to answering their own questions, solving for their own data problems. But I think turning insight into action is going to be really clear, and for us, that's about values. And we talked about communication, fairness, transparency, the best data in the world, and again, I say this a lot. The best data environment in the world only tells you with greater and greater clarity what is. What you do about it
Yeah.
is down to your value set.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that strong values and communication, that's going to be arguably even more important than the kind of data literacy and technical skills that everybody seems to be speaking.
Yeah, absolutely. The data's not doing the job for you, right? It's just,
No.
again, helping what you as a business are already trying to achieve. So
Right.
yeah, I think that's really well said. Last question, and really appreciate all this valuable insight that you've given us. So it's been fantastic so far, Joe. So what advice would you give to everyone listening here and watching, who are about to start this journey, given the experience you have gained? What would you tell them?
You can't brute force adoption.
Yeah.
As much as from when you start on this journey, you've got a better toolkit. You know that it's going to make life better for your people. There will be inertia. You cannot brute force adoption. The more collaboration, the more feedback, the more championing that you can get into this, the more patient you're prepared to be with iterative changes. I think you get a longer term adoption that is stickier, that builds belief more, than just delivering a replacement system from the top down. Involve
Yeah.
your people if you possibly
Yeah.
can.
Yeah.
And as I said before, make sure you know what your values are.
Mm.
You're distributing that decision-making capability empowering your leaders from the bottom up, brilliant. And it really does smooth the way to better results in almost every domain. But they have to share values to be consistent. They all have to be singing from the same song sheet. So briefing, listening, getting those guys on board, absolutely key.
Yeah, fantastic. I think really well said. Given the experience you've got, clearly you have been people orientated going forward and ensured that they have come on the journey with you, and that has therefore made that journey well received and productive for your business going forward as well, clearly. So I
You like
think
to
it's
think
great
so,
to get
Phil.
that
Yeah, it
insight.
might be because obviously I worked in shop and far too many of our colleagues still have my mobile number.
Yeah.
But
That
yes,
does help.
we
That
like
does
to
help.
think so.
Yeah. Well, I would also say though, you've walked in their shoes, and I think generally employees value that. So you've been there, you understood, and you can give that perspective. And I think that's also valuable because you can be like, what we're trying to do will value you because of these things that I know you have to do. And I think that's just great insight. So yeah, it's really good. Well, thank you so much for your time and your insight, Joe. We really, really value that. I think we've got the closing poll out, and then we're going to go to Q&A, which I believe Roz is going to help us with. So if you can see on the poll there, what do we got here? Don't think it's quite, see, it's still open. So we'll come back to that in a minute. And Roz, should we go to, oh, there we go. We just got the answers. After today, how ready do you feel you are to take the next steps with data and AI and workforce planning? So ready to act, interested. So I'd say they are definitely already advanced. That's good. And not ready yet, still a small amount. And there's work to do, right? When you're not quite there, but it's great to see so many of the audience clearly have been inspired by your journey as well, Joe. So that's really, really good to see. And we appreciate you giving that insight. Thank you. Roz, we got any questions from the
Yes,
audience?
we do. Okay, so one for Joe, I think. So if you could change one thing about workforce planning across the industry tomorrow, what would it be?
If I could change one thing, wow, I mean that's a massive question because I don't think there is one thing that would work for 7,000 colleagues who work in all of our shops. I think I would. Oh, wow, that's really put me on the spot. I would help people to believe in it a bit more. I think and it's really hard for me to articulate, but if there was a way that we could bring more understanding of the benefits and take away some of the fear of having your life managed by, a leader in an ivory tower and his computer and his AI robot. If I could build a bit more trust, I think it would make these transitions easier. But nevertheless, that challenge has been part of our learning journey. So I'd probably miss it. Does that make sense?
Yes, yeah, absolutely. Perfect. We've got just in the interest of time, I'm just going to move through a few more questions if that's okay. So assuming your AI tool is scheduling based on your colleagues' availability when they're available to work, how often throughout the year are you capturing or recapturing your colleagues' availability?
In almost real time. Colleagues can mark their own availability and change it at will through the UI. So anything we do with automatic scheduling just drafts rotas. It doesn't lock colleagues into a particular shift pattern. So as I've said, it's all about empowering them to make decisions while taking away as much of the heavy lifting as we possibly can.
Perfect. How has pre-booking holidays impacted overall workforce management, productivity, and morale?
Really well. Initially, difficult launch because we were taking away freedom from colleagues, or that was the kind of negative perception. But again, we book colleagues' holidays for them according to demand, but we don't lock them into those bookings, so they can work with their line manager to shift them around. So I think after having done this now for 2 years, the perception has been shifted much more towards the business is helping me make sure that I get all the leave I'm owed this year, which has really turned a bit of a kind of fear-based negative into a supportive positive.
Perfect. And you clearly communicate a lot with your store managers and value their feedback. What is the most common win that you've had communicated back to the business, and what have you done to try and replicate that across other sites?
The most common win, I think, is making sure colleagues telling me that they can run their personal lives. And that's just that's not necessarily a business goal, I appreciate, but it's my value. When I speak to colleagues, obviously, Ros, as I do, as we do pretty constantly, and with my history, I'm very accessible to colleagues. That it's much easier for them to book a doctor's appointment, right? We all know how hard it is to get a doctor's appointment in this country. That they can do their school runs confidently, that they get the long weekend that they want because their family's in town, and that's just the way that things are done, rather than being friction or a mountain to climb. That's what puts a smile on my face.
Amazing. And can you share an example of how your provider has helped you adapt as workforce challenges evolved?
Yeah, I mean, look, Ros, I'll talk about Rotageek because we're here. We've been on a hell of a journey together over the last 8 years, and I think I said this on some content we've done before. You guys help us adapt by listening, by understanding the problems that we have, by kind of making space to have those discussions. We've talked to pretty much every big workforce provider in the market over the last decade. The reason that we stay with Rotageek is because we genuinely believe that you care about our delivery and our values in the same way that we do.
Amazing. That's amazing to hear. So I think that's all we've got time for today. And as I mentioned, the recording will be sent out shortly, so you can rewatch should you need to. Thanks for listening, and we hope you found this session informative. And hopefully we'll see you again soon. Take care. Bye, everyone.
Thank
Thank you,
you.
everyone.
Bye bye.